Story. This week we shall be focusing on the interview of the week, for we have INB Minister Manish Tiwari at his candid best. Tiwari speaks to us about being the UPA's most articulate Council of Defence, about the Rahul versus Modi battle, and also why he uses such long, complicated words. As the Information and Broadcasting Minister, Manish Tiwari is the most articulate defence of both the party and the government. A former Youth Congress chief, the 48-year-old has come up from the grassroots but seems equally at ease on the tabletops. For he is the only Minister of State who is invited to cabinet meetings. This is because of the sensitive nature of his ministry. Currently, he is the government's best face forward, both when it comes to lauding its achievements and explaining its failures. Hello and welcome to Cover Story, Manish. My first question is, situation at hand, all this round of disaster tourism. What is your stand? Should VIPs go in troubled areas or not?
Well, I think you are really getting distracted from the major question at hand. And the major question at hand is that when a natural disaster takes place, can governments and political parties and other people who possibly have some kind of piety in their heart mobilize themselves as expeditiously as possible and ensure that relief reaches those people who require it the most. And I think here we need to step back and take a look at the broader picture. Since the 16th of June, ever since this unfortunate occurrence happened, government has been able to mobilize all elements of national power and bring them to bear in order to see that rescue, relief and to some extent rehabilitation gets expedited.
Okay, and government took a while. The reaction, the state government was also delayed. From the central also there was a delay in sending a points person there to look after.
Well, I think again you are possibly getting into nitpicking, which should be completely avoided at this scale. And here, unfortunately, what I see, just because it makes good television for some people, this level of nitpicking, which should completely be avoided. You see, the media says that the political class should have a sense of responsibility. Let me just reverse this charge. I think the media also in such situations needs to exercise a certain modicum of national responsibility. There could be fair criticism.
That is wrong.
There could be fair criticism that, if you have been going in on Indian Air Force helicopters in order to ensure that your feed reaches the people, you are possibly, and that could be legitimate criticism, that you've been blocking, very, very priority seats in helicopters which could have been used for rescue purposes.
No, so therefore, what about the political class? We are not arguing this.
I think, the kind of discourse that we've saw playing itself out, completely detracting, from the heroic effort which has been put into this relief effort, it really hurts me as a citizen of this country to see this post-mortem concurrently taking place while the rescue operations are unfolding. So therefore, a time will come. A time will come when the rescue and the relief phase of it is over, when we will step back and we'll take a look at what went wrong, what are the lessons learned, where do we need to come up the learning curve so that we are much better equipped the next time around. And unfortunately, whether you like it or not, there is no template, there is no one size fits all, and every experience, Priya, is a learning experience.
No, fair enough, but you still haven't answered my question. What is the lesson that you've learned from this? Should VIPs go to disaster areas or not? Just the Home Minister made a statement saying they shouldn't go. And Rahul Gandhi still went.
Well, again, I think this is really a trivialization of the entire effort, because after all, people have elected individuals and political parties who hold public offices, and those public officers make them accountable for the responsibility which they discharge. If the Prime Minister of India and the chairperson of the United Progressive Alliance have gone in on the first available opportunity, you possibly would not have a situation whereby you overrode all norms of the national disaster relief effort. Saw that 145 crores are deposited in the bank accounts of the Uttarakhand government on the 20th of June itself, ensured that a National Crisis Management Center starts functioning 24/7, chaired by the Cabinet Secretary. The point I'm trying to make is that there are certain visits which are imperative, and there are certain visits which unfortunately have been done by people who had poll panels, and I stress the word poll panels, which are completely avoidable.
But why is Modi's visit avoidable? And first of all, why is Modi a Rambo? Why did you call him that?
I did not call him anything. I am not in the business of labeling people. I only drew your attention to a story which was published in one of the newspapers, where some gentleman claimed that on his own, in situ or suo moto, on a day when all the elements of national power collectively rescued 10,000 people, he had actually pulled out 15,000 people on his own. And in fact, somebody has done a very interesting analysis, I think it was published day before yesterday, that even if you go by the logistical strength that he claims to have deployed, it would have required even a much more Herculean effort, which Rambo makes in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 put together, the different serials of his movies, to get the number of people out in a single day, as someone claims.
And well, the BJP has said that they were misquoted on that. They've taken back that statement. But after
it's not a question of the BJP being misquoted. I think we are missing the wood for the trees. It is symptomatic of the insinuation, the innuendo, and the complete untruth which a PR machine, puts out in the public space. I think what it fundamentally underscores is an attempt to try and milk even a national tragedy for political purposes. That's what is worrying.
But milking a national tragedy for political purposes, how do you explain Rahul Gandhi's visit? I'm okay with Sonia and PM's visit. You said that did something, there was a positive impact as the head Prime Minister. Why did Rahul delay so long in going? And secondly, why go at all? After you made fun of VIP visits, you criticized, this Home Minister has said that there should be no such visits. Then why does Rahul have to go?
Again, let me
and going so late once the rescue is over, what's the big deal in his visit?
Let me explain it to you. I began this conversation saying that when a natural disaster takes place, what is imperative is how governments, central and state, political systems, because they have cadres on the ground, and other organizations who are willing to contribute are able to mobilize themselves in record time. So if you see, I'm explaining it. If you see the logical sequence of events, once Prime Minister and Mrs. Gandhi had visited, after that, on the government side, I have already outlined the measures. On the party side, the Uttarakhand unit of the Indian National Congress, in conjunction with the units of the neighboring states, was mobilized to see that as to how they can contribute to the relief effort. That effort had been underway for almost a week, or maybe a week and a couple of days more. So Mr. Rahul Gandhi, as the Vice President of the Indian National Congress, I think it fell to his remit to see as to how that effort was proceeding, to try and streamline it if at all there were some glitches, and to also find out as to what more needs to be done. For example,
late in the day for him to want to find out what more needs to be done.
For example, from my own parliamentary constituency of Ludhiana, from the 17th to the 18th of June onwards, in the last 10 days, I think we've sent more than 100 trucks of relief material.
But there was no photo ops of you flagging this off, Manish. That is what we are saying.
The question is that ultimately, if somebody is putting it out in the public space that, look, this is, the party is mobilizing itself, don't see it as a photo op. It is also a signal to other people, to other political organizations, that rather than nitpicking, rather than indulging in unnecessary criticism or chest thumping, if you could also emulate what is being done and try and mobilize your cadres towards a relief effort, I think see it in a positive perspective.
But you're talking about emulation. Let me talk to you about the sequence of events the way I see it. First Sonia and Manmohan went, the Prime Minister and Sonia Gandhi. This was followed by Narendra Modi. A lot of criticism, where is Rahul Gandhi? He was not in the country at that time. Rahul did not come back, but he came back 4 or 5 days later and then went. The way we see it, there was pressure from Modi's visit, which is what forced Rahul to make a very delayed visit. And what did he achieve?
Absolutely incorrect. I think if at all that is your appreciation of the sequence of events, it's an absolutely incorrect appreciation, for the simple reason, after Prime Minister and Mrs. Gandhi visited, then the Home Minister went to Uttarakhand. In addition to that, Mrs. Ambika Soni, the General Secretary in charge, and Mr. Motilal Vora, the Treasurer of the Indian National Congress, they visited. We had the Secretary in charge of the of Uttarakhand, in the Secretariat of the Indian National Congress, permanently stationed there, and this is in addition to the effort which was mounted by our members of the Legislative Assembly and the Congress cadres on the ground. So therefore, if you see it in a logical sequence, and again, as I said, not try and unnecessarily nitpick, you would really appreciate the magnitude of the effort which has been put in by both the government and the Congress party, and the complete absence of that effort on the behalf of the principal political forces, at least in the state of Uttarakhand.
But having said that, why did Shinde, if there were so many VIP visits going, so many Congress leaders going, why did Shinde have to say no VIP visits? Or do they disregard the VIP, the Congress people don't listen to Shinde?
For the simple reason that the Home Minister did not want, and correctly so, that people go there, do a heli survey, and then come back and make told claims of having pulled out an X number of people, claims which are very parochial for people who ostensibly, think or are under the illusion that they have a national role. So the Home Minister, in his wisdom, very correctly, sent out an advisory that this is not the time when you should milk a national tragedy for political gain. If at all you have to contribute, we are not saying that your contribution is not welcome. Channelize it through the government of Uttarakhand so that it then can be directed to the places which need them the most, and the entire relief effort can be optimized.
But Manish, the Home Minister issued an advisory, and yet Rahul Gandhi went. He doesn't believe in listening to his Home Minister.
Well, for the simple reason that insofar as Mr. Rahul Gandhi is concerned, Mr. Rahul Gandhi did not use
different rules apply for Rahul Gandhi.
Did not use the resources of the state. That is A.
But he's a Z category person. His visit is a distraction.
Well, I'll tell you.
It's better he sends somebody there to do the work.
Well, I'll tell you, if somebody who would appreciate the effort that he has put in terms of the miles that he covered by road, the effort which was made to streamline and to harmonize and put into a cohesive and a holistic perspective the efforts which the Congress party was making, and juxtapose it against this heli-tourism.
Because you did not allow Modi to land. The Uttarakhand CM has told us that I will not allow Modi to land.
Well, the gentleman did land, and in a span of 2 hours, claimed that he's pulled out 15,000 people. I mean, nothing could be more ridiculous and obtuse than that.
Oh, fair enough, because I can see you had a lot of practice at defending the indefensible, first in the party and now in the government.
It is not indefensible.
Modi
I think, somebody who detracts from the fact, Priya, that 1,26,000 people evacuated under the most inhospitable conditions, brave men and women risking their lives, the day the weather turns inclement, the Chief of the Indian Air Force sending out a message to those who are stranded, hang in, our waters will keep turning. They lost men, they lost young officers, and here we have people, who are trying to sort of nitpick on that effort. It actually, makes me, for the lack of a better word, makes me very angry as a citizen.
You've been defending both the party and the government. I'm going to take turn the subject away a bit. Which has been more difficult to defend, the party or the government?
Well, I don't think you are either defending or offending anybody. I think
and the spokesperson is counsel for the defense.
Well, he's not counsel for the defense. I think the role of a spokesperson is to try and put things in the perspective in which the party sees it. So therefore, in my 5 years as the Congress spokesperson, I have never felt that I had an adversarial relationship either with the media or with other political parties. Yes, there is a cut and thrust of the democratic debate which you indulge in, but we've tried to sort of keep it as civilized as possible. And if any spokesperson, sees himself as an instrument of either offense or defense, I think he's making a fundamental error in appreciating his role. I never saw myself, because yes, I've been counsel for offense and defense, but that has been in the court of law. That's not been in the public domain.
The public trial.
That's not been in the public domain. So that's not how I appreciated my role.
But Manish, I appreciate a job because you have a tough task. You have a home minister. When there's an actual attack, he doesn't bother to cut his visit. He doesn't come back earlier. He was in the US. You have a vice president. There is a calamity. He doesn't cut his visit short either. He takes his own time to come back. I mean, it's a tough job defending these kind of people.
Well, I think again, now that you have taken the discourse to the Naxal attack, see, what is most unfortunate is that you had an attack where the Congress party lost some of its very, very senior leaders. Right? The party lost some very, very senior leaders. And you had a government which belongs to another political party, a party which claims that it is the principal opposition party. And what struck me was, except for sanctimonious formal lip service, there was no remorse. There was not even a genuine expression of regret.
What did you want them to say?
How can you have different standards? For two yatras, you carry out a Vikas Yatra, which is covered by 3,000 to 5,000 policemen. The opposition carries out its own yatra, which is left completely unguarded.
Okay, moving on, Manish, to your ad, the Bharat Nirman ad, that's created a bit of stir. A lot of people are saying, is this the Congress's version of the India Shining ads? Because they spend a lot of money advertising something that was not correct. Similarly, in Bharat Nirman, a lot of your projects haven't really seen the light of day or have not been successfully implemented.
Well,
whether it's Narega, whether it is, your food bill is still not
Well, I think what needs to be understood is that India Shining happened on the cusp of an election.
We
are not there. When a government high on the test throne of a victory, an electoral victory in certain states, thought they had the country for the asking. Right. So India Shining came at that point in time when the reality was India was simmering. What you saw, between the 14th of May 2013 to the 4th of June 2013, over a period of 3 weeks, was actually an attempt to mainstream the India story as it has unfolded over the past 9 years. There were no toll claims which were made. There was no attempt at hype or at an attempt to spin.
What will you take to the people? What have you achieved?
I think, fundamentally, Priya, in the last 9 years, the UPA government has succeeded in building up perhaps the most ambitious and the most diverse entitlement-based rights structure.
Ambitious, but is it based on reality? Is it working?
Of course it is working in the sense that you have a situation whereby the rights-based entitlement structure, in certain areas has flowered and bloomed. In certain other areas where the initiatives are nascent, it is still striking roots. But 20 years down the line, when somebody would look at it with the benefit of hindsight, he or she would appreciate that there was a government which created a social security net for 1.2 billion people.
But do you have those 20 years? You have not even 12 months. It is elections. Many don't is not, because it is.
Well, I'll tell you, what we initiated in 2004 was not aimed at 2009. What we initiated in 2009 was not aimed at 2014.
What have you initiated? I think UPA 2 is not as successful as UPA 1. Would you agree with that?
The question is, again, I think that's an erroneous paradigm. The
What has
paradigm
UPA 2 achieved?
well, let me tell you. Let's start from the right to information. You come down to the
UPA 1.
Well, you come down to the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Program.
UPA 1 again.
After that, you come down to the right to education, which is UPA 2.
Just about.
Which is not just about. Which is not just about. And you know, between UPA 1 and UPA 2, you had certain initiatives which were taken, which took a while to fructify. For example, the land acquisition bill.
Which is still to fructify.
Yes, but which was initiated again during UPA 1. So therefore, all that I'm trying to say is, you need to see government in a continuum. You see, there were certain commitments we made in 2004. We were able to fulfill them in 2009. There were certain commitments we made in 2009, you know, which we are attempting to fulfill now.
Manish, why is it that when one has to, need a rebuttal from Modi, you're the first person we all think of. You're the Congress's best attacker on Modi. Why is that?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that the Honorable Congress President made me in charge or the assistant to the in charge of Gujarat between 2004 and 2007. This was 2 years after the Gujarat pogrom had taken place, and I, in those 3 years, got a feel of the ground situation, which made me convinced. I mean, I don't consider him to be an enemy. I do not consider anybody in the political firmament to be an enemy. But it made me convinced that the way forward for India was the consolidation of the idea of India, the vision of India, as the founding fathers had conceived it. Now put it in a template. You see, when we got independent in 1947, there was an idea of India and there was an idea of Pakistan. You know, the idea of India flourished while the idea of Pakistan floundered. In some strange and inverse sense of the term, you know, that failed sectarian idea of Pakistan is now being sought to be imposed on the country by the BJP.
That's a very interesting...
So therefore, and that worries me, because my own sense of a country, you know, which has such diverse minorities, which has such diverse number of languages, you know, culinary habits, etc., convinces me that India cannot be led from the left or India cannot be led from the right. India can only be led from the center. And even during the Vajpayee years, if you would, and you covered the BJP at that point in time, Mr. Vajpayee was able to continue for 6 years, essentially because he had moderated his position from right to center right.
Modi is trying to do that. He's trying to...
Well, I think, you know, I mean, I don't want to pick on any individual or anything of that sort, but if you really had compassion in your heart, I mean, you are interested in visiting Uttarakhand, but I would like to ask the Honorable Chief Minister of Gujarat that post the 2002 pogrom, how many relief camps in his own state did he visit? In the last 11 or 12 years as Chief Minister, has he ever gone to Naroda Patia? Has he ever gone to Juhupura? You know, those areas where unfortunately the minorities live. If you see their development indices and juxtapose them to the localities, you know, which live cheek and jowl to them, you know, it gives you an idea as to what the fundamental political impulse or the fundamental ideological impulse of the gentleman in question or the party in question is.
But how many Congress leaders have been to these localities?
Well, I think a lot of Congress leaders live in those localities. A lot of Congress leaders live in those localities. A lot of Congress people a lot of Congress leaders, in fact, do an outreach which is 24/7 on a continuous basis.
Name some national leaders who've done this.
Well, you know, a lot of prosecutions which you are seeing unfolding in fake encounter cases admitted on affidavit by the government of Gujarat, I think was because there were vigilant people on the ground.
My last few questions, Manish, about you personally. You're a familiar face on TV. We all know you in a box, so to say. But what is behind the box? A little bit, for instance, very few people know that your father was one of the first victims of Punjab militancy. How old were you then, and does this have anything of you joining politics?
Well, I think it has everything to do with my joining politics, because
your father was a professor.
He was a nominated member of the Rajya Sabha. He was a professor of comparative modern Indian literature. He espoused the causes of Punjabiyat, which was the composite culture of Hindus and Sikhs living together syncretically in harmony. Now that was a direct ideological challenge to those who believed in separatism of a particular denomination. So they decided that, they would end his life rather violently, completely ignoring the fact that my mother is a Jat Sikh, belongs to the very same community which, some of these misguided elements came from. And I think to a very large extent, that did have an impact.
How old were you then?
I was 18, and that had an impact in shaping or reinforcing my beliefs and the conviction that pluralism and the idea of India as conceived by the founding fathers was the only way forward for this country.
And who got you into politics? You were a youth Congress president. Was Rajiv Gandhi? Or?
Well, in the sense that I had an interest in public affairs, so therefore in 81 itself I became the college unit president of the NSUI, and by the time this tragedy took place I was already the general secretary of the Punjab unit of the NSUI, so I had been there 2 or 3 years. So and then the rest of it became a continuum. But yes, I mean, if it wouldn't have been, let's say, for a watershed event in your life, I may have, just gone about, did my masters, found a job, or maybe started practicing full time after I finished my law. But I guess destiny has, deals a strange hand at times.
Okay, last question. You tend to use very complicated words in a sentence. Is it your law degree or is it...
Well, it has nothing to do with it. It all has to do with the fact that, all of us after graduation, take that graduate management admission test. And one of the things that you need to bug up is possibly a dictionary to get through that. So I guess it has just stayed with me.
I think that dictionary you swallowed is doing you very well. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Well, now you can see why he's the Congress' favorite line of defense when it comes to attacking Narendra Modi. That is all for this week. Thank you for watching Cover Story and see you again next week.